But when I read Romans 9:21, did you think Paul was talking about the man born blind when he said common use? Is that who you thought he was talking about? Well, it's ironic, but the opposite is true. The importance of this man's life in the will of God made the blind man the clay of noble purpose. We might think because he was blind, he was for lesser use, but not at all. God had a purpose in this man's life. And by bringing him to Jesus' attention that day, he fulfills it. Many perfectly healthy people have come and gone on this earth and fought against the purpose of God the whole way. They had every mental faculty. They had every health benefit. They had riches, perhaps. They had position, perhaps. And yet they were against the purpose of God from day one. And yet this man, born blind, fulfills God's purpose in his life. Now, in the end, we don't presume to lay claim to all the answers in this kind of case. It is for God to know, because God is the only one who really sees. And yet we trust, and yet we rely that our God is more gracious. Our God is more loving than we deserve, no matter what trouble comes our way. Verse 4, Jesus goes on to say, as long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. You see, Jesus came to bring light into our world, to bring understanding. Along with his work of atonement on the cross, Jesus also spent a lot of time correcting people's misconceptions about who God is. This society that Jesus was speaking to, first century Jewish society, had allowed itself to blame the victim for a crime they didn't even commit. If they don't need the light, who does? Our task in bringing truth to our world is a continuation of that work. The world is full of false and dangerous ideas, is it not? You could all think of dozens of them, ideas that are out there that are dangerous and false and worrisome. Sometimes those ideas find their way into the church as well. They find their way into our thinking and how we view the world. Our job is to bring light into dark places, to work for the truth. So let's see how Jesus reacts to the man born blind after he gets done talking to his disciples, verses 6 through 12. Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened, they demanded? He replied, the man they call Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man, they asked him. I don't know, he said. We'll pick up the text next week from there and continue with it, but let's deal with this portion. Jesus chose this method of healing the blind man on purposefully. Rest assured, he knew exactly what he was doing when he chose to do it this way. He knew it would give the man an opportunity to demonstrate his faith. He has to find his way to the pool, does he not? He's still blind at this point. He may know whereabouts it is in the city of Jerusalem. Certainly he does, but he still has to find his way there. Or he has to find someone to lead him there. And he still has to go down into the pool and get the water and wash off his eyes. It is an act of obedience, an act of trust. It gives this man a chance to demonstrate that he believes that Jesus can do what he said he can do. Jesus could have healed the man instantly with a simple prayer, couldn't he? He could have waved his hands and the man would have been able to see. He could have put his hands in the man's eyes and he could have seen. He could have done anything. But he chose what he was doing for a reason. Because he's going to confront the self-righteousness of those who claim to follow Yahweh. And Jesus needs this as an example. He is going to do something to force them to see. And we will see that in next week's text. You see, the making of the mud and the placing of it on his hands, you might not have thought of it this way, but that constituted work on the Sabbath, according to the Pharisees. The making of mud is work. Is that what God had in mind when he said, the Sabbath is holy, do no work? Was he thinking, don't put mud on a blind man's eyes so he can see? Not likely. We'll see how Jesus reacts to that next week. Jesus knew that he was setting them up with an unanswerable question of his own. This began with a question that Jesus was not prepared to answer. Was it this man or his parents that sinned? And now Jesus is going to put the Pharisees in a similar bind. When they find out about it, they are going to be more than a little bit upset that he chose to heal a man on the Sabbath by doing work. But they won't be able to deny that the man can see, will they? He's standing right there. He can see. Everybody knows he was blind. So they're faced with a choice. Either our understanding of the Sabbath is wrong, or the power to heal that Jesus clearly has doesn't come from God after all. Those are two bad choices. They are not willing to accept the first, that maybe we are wrong. But they haven't been able to convince the people of the second. They've tried to convince the people that Jesus is not from God. But you can't deny this power. There's also the reaction of his neighbors. They're in disbelief. Because it's not every day that someone born with a serious handicap is suddenly healed, is it? We have a saying in English, seeing is believing. When you can see it, you believe it. Well, it's got a double meaning here, doesn't it? The blind man can see now because he believed when he couldn't see. And yet the neighbors have had a hard time believing even though they can see clearly the whole time. They may see, but they don't believe. He couldn't see, but he did believe. What miraculous act of God would you be willing to accept today? We often speak of God answering prayer, don't we? God healed in this situation. God helped in that situation. God did this. God did that. And we speak sometimes as if those are miraculous healings. The cancer that disappeared. The surgery that suddenly wasn't necessary. The accident that should have killed someone that they lived through. We speak about Wilma finding her glasses after 5 months. It was probably a miracle. Thank you for adding that one. But do we really believe that? Are we really willing to believe that God answers prayer like that? If it happens to a family member, maybe. If it happens to ourselves, we say, hey, I believe now because God helped me out. Does that make it easier for you to stop doubting and believe that God can heal? That God does answer prayer? Well, they asked the man, how then were your eyes opened? We all have that same answer. His answer is our answer. The man they call Jesus healed me of my blindness. The man they call Jesus made me well. It shows us that the blind man didn't really know Jesus beforehand, did he? Why else would he call him the man they call Jesus? He could have said, Jesus healed me. But he didn't even know who Jesus was. He'd heard of him, he knew the name, but he didn't know him. Most of our world today knows of Jesus. They've got some notions about Jesus. They've heard about the birth. They've heard about Easter and the cross. They know some things. They also know some things that aren't quite so correct. They've heard stuff about Jesus, but they don't know him. Only those who seek Jesus ever come to know him. And then the end of the text is instructive for us. Where is the man? He says, I don't know. You see, those who heard that Jesus had healed this man still needed to look for him and find him themselves. It's the same thing today. The same truth still persists. We all need to seek and find the man they call Jesus. things that I think we can take from this text and apply to our own lives. No matter how many times we say this, no matter how many texts we read that reinforce this notion, it still comes back. It is not our job to sit in judgment over the misfortune of others. It isn't, it never has been, and it is not going to be. Only God can see the whole picture. Only God knows what's really going on there. It may be tempting, but don't do it. Secondly, it's important to think about your beliefs, about your understandings about God, about the Scriptures, about Jesus. Where do they come from? What is the basis of those notions? Because we ourselves are not immune to being in serious error. His disciples were. They had a serious misconception and didn't even know it. We certainly need to be aware of our beliefs. We need to be cognizant of them. We need to know where they come from to make sure that they do come from Scripture. And lastly, when other people ask you about the man who healed you from your sin, like the neighbors asked him how he could see, take them to see Jesus. And remember, they will only ask if they can clearly see that you are in